Hi, and welcome to 30 Second Success Connect, where we introduce entrepreneurs and professionals who love to connect and lead with their hearts. I'm Laura Templeton, founder and CEO of 30 Second Success, and with me today is Marc Kramer. Marc has run over 25 startups, written 6 books, raised billions of dollars, and is a former Inc. Entrepreneur of the Year. The first book he wrote was Power Networking. Marc, I am so excited to have you here with me. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am so thrilled that you said yes.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, and it's so funny because one of the things that you had shared with me when we were reconnecting and talking a little bit about this was how we met. And it's so funny because I think the first time we met was at an angel venture fair event in the city at Comcast at the LIFT Labs, at their old LIFT Labs, because now they're in the new building, right?
In December of 2018.
Right. And I don't even know how I got invited to that event, but I was so impressed by the people that I met there. And
Thank
just,
you.
oh my gosh, it was amazing. And I think you ran it a little bit more about from the perspective of come and learn how to position yourself for the opportunity to connect with, angel investors.
Yeah, the programs that I run for the Angel Venture Fair, I'm the executive director of the Private Investors Forum that runs the Angel Venture Fair. And what we try to do is educate entrepreneurs on how to present themselves to angel investors and how to network, which is incredibly important, is the networking aspect of the events that we run, so you can network and put yourself in a position to raise capital from the right type of investor.
Right. And I love the whole idea of the presenting, creating that pitch and that story, and then getting feedback from potential investors on what you need to improve to make that pitch even better, right?
That's right.
It was just incredible. I was so blown away by the 3 presenters that were there that day. And it was, just light bulb moments throughout the day,
Well, one of those presenters, I don't choose all the presenters with the idea that they'll all be polished and smooth. I pick a couple presenters hoping that they will not be polished. And one of the 3 was definitely a train wreck. And in fact, it was, to the point that the woman who had referred him to me, I actually couldn't watch it anymore. It was so painful to watch. And the irony was that he was an Ivy League grad, had been in the business world a long period of time, and did not have someone coach him and work on his presentation skills. It was kind of surprising when I heard him present. So I think it's so important to develop those presentation skills. And like your business, like the 30 seconds, it's funny, I always tell people that you need to be able to hone down your 30-second presentation, maybe as much as 60 seconds, but essentially about the time it takes from an elevator in the Mellon Bank building to go from the first floor to the Pyramid Club. You need to be able to tell your story quickly enough that somebody will want to engage you further.
It's funny that you use that elevator in particular, because that actually happened to me.
Yeah,
I
happened to me as well.
Yeah, I met a woman. I was coming out of the Pyramid Club. I happened to meet her at the elevator bank, and I introduced myself. And, we had a great conversation in the elevator, and we've reconnected since then. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, you never know who you're going to meet on the elevator.
Yeah. And then, it's just amazing to me. Tell me a little bit more about your book, Power Networking.
So that was the first book I wrote. I wrote that for McGraw-Hill. And the whole thing was, I grew up in a small town called Coatesville. My father had a small business there. My grandfather had a small business there. But essentially, they knew no one outside the town. And so they weren't able to really help me connect with other people, develop opportunities for myself. And I realized over time that it's that old saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And it's true throughout the history of the world. It's all about, knowing the right people to get introductions that put you in a position to be successful. And so growing up in that small town, not knowing anyone, I made it my mission to make sure that I connected with as many people as I could at any event and then offer my help to people. And that's what I do. I don't ask people to help me per se, but I always ask people, who could I connect you with? What could I do for you? And of course, people always ask you later about, here, what could I do for you? Who could I connect you to with? Mm-hmm. So I wrote that book, Power Networking, because so few people have good networking skills, and they needed a methodology to help them become networkers. And especially people who are in the technical side, like engineers and computer science people and healthcare, like biotech and pharmaceutical. It's just not the way they're wired. And it's not what they do on a day-to-day basis. And yet they need to be able to tell their story, especially as entrepreneurs, to be able to raise capital, or even if they're not entrepreneurs and they're trying to sell an idea within the corporation, getting to know the right people and being able to tell your story in a way that resonates with people.
I love that, and it sounds like we do a lot of the same in that educational world, especially with professionals. Helping people understand that there's that internal message as well as that external message that you need to have a better understanding of and a better grasp of, so that you can grab someone's attention when you have an opportunity to share what you do and even the projects that you're working on. So you're absolutely right. I love that. And it sounds like, I didn't even realize that you have that book, Power Networking, until I read what you had sent me. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so awesome. Because we're kind of that kindred spirit thing. I share a lot of the importance of creating those power partnerships in my book, 30 Second Success. So share a little bit more about how Power Partners or Power Networking has helped you over the years grow and develop your business.
Well, I would say my whole business is based on networking. I mean, every great opportunity I've ever had is because I've networked with people and people have opened doors for me. So, from when I started the Penn State Technology Development Center, which was a business incubator for Penn State, I had met somebody in an event and they said, did you know that Penn State is looking for somebody to start a business incubator? And that's how I ended up applying for that position. And, throughout my life, that's always been the case. I come up with an idea and then I talk to someone and say, do you know that this person would be really good at helping you? So like I started an insurance venture where I created the first insurance product to insure small business bank accounts against cyber theft. And I talked to this lawyer saying, who would I go to that might be willing to fund this? And he said, I have 5 insurance companies that I think would be interested. And one of them ended up funding that deal. The same thing I created a company called Prompt Payment where we did reverse factoring. And I was looking for a CEO and somebody said, I was the CEO, but I was looking for a partner who could be president, chief operating officer. And they said, there's this guy who's retired now. He used to be president, CEO of American Express Credit Corp. I think he's looking for something. And that guy became my partner. And actually one of my closest friends were like brothers. So, if it wasn't for those things, like even one of my books that I wrote called Small Business Turnaround, the publisher at my company, McGraw-Hill, made an introduction. McGraw-Hill said, we're not interested in this book. Who cares about small businesses turning around? And she said, but I have a friend at Adams Media. So she used her network and said, let me introduce you, because I had written to 57 publishers after McGraw-Hill turned me down. They all turned me down. I even said to them, how about if I underwrite this thing for you and I won't receive any upfront advance, nothing. I really believed in it. So finally she said, well, what about this guy? His name is Jerry Calmeese, and he's at Adams Media. And that guy not only loved the idea, he sent me back a contract with a check.
Wow.
And that book was named one of the 30 best business books by Executive Book Summaries. And so if it wasn't for these networking opportunities, none of those things would have happened. So I would say that 90% or more of my good fortune in life has all happened because I had a woman in my synagogue that I knew, and she became a manager at the Wharton School of Business for 1 year. And somebody could not make working in Lima, Peru, to work in Latin America for Wharton doing consulting work with Latin American companies. And she said, hey, would you be interested in talking to my boss? We need somebody for Latin America. And I had a home in Panama at that time. I said, sure, I would be glad to talk to him. Be very cool. And I was thinking it'd be like, a one-time opportunity, but turned into, I became a faculty member there for 10 years. Now, again, if I didn't network, none of this would have happened.
That's amazing that, it's just, and I love that about networking, how it just opens so many different doors that you would have never even thought about. That's one of the things that I love sharing with young people today, is that the connections that you make now may not help you right away, but down the road, they're going to lead to something more, something bigger, especially if you stay in touch periodically with people. It just makes such a world of difference. And social media makes a big difference in helping us do that today. So, so share with us a little bit about how you feel and what your perspective is on using social media to stay connected with your network.
Well, I use a variety of social media. One of my biggest is LinkedIn. And I use LinkedIn to connect with other people that could open up doors for the things that I do. So I have a little over 8,000 contacts on LinkedIn. And I thought that was like a large number until a friend of mine told me she had 15,000. And she's a doctor. I'm like, 15,000. It's like an outrageous sum. But what I like about LinkedIn is that you can join LinkedIn groups, and you can learn from people there, and you can also tell people about things that you see that could be helpful to them. And I also write a national column for American City Business Journal, so I'll put my link on to my articles on my LinkedIn page, and then people will see it, and then people will contact me and say, I've got questions for you, or could you open a door to this person you just interviewed? And I feel like if they have a good substantive question to ask them, but if it's straight sales pitch that they're trying to sell them something, more than likely I'm not going to go and make that linkage for them. But if they have a question and they want to develop a real relationship with them, not just sell them something, I'm up to make that introduction for them. Because at the same time, you have to protect your reputation and the relationships you've developed. So I use LinkedIn. I use Twitter to get information out about things. Like I'll share stories with people about stuff on Twitter. Same with Instagram. I use YouTube and Vimeo to go and show interviews with people. So I created something called the Best Business Minds during this pandemic, with the idea that a lot of business people would have time to be educated on things that could improve their chances of enhancing their business or their employees or coming up with new ideas. So I started the bestbusinessminds.com, and I interview these people using Zoom. So I wanted to learn how to use Zoom for that. And also I started something a year ago called consultinguniversityusa.com, actually a couple of years ago, because I wrote a book on consulting for Entrepreneur Press. And I wanted to learn, how do you go and teach people online? I've taught online for schools, but using their system, but not a system like Zoom. So I think that social media and all these different tools that we're now seeing and using, like Zoom is really great. I mean, I wish I would have bought the stock like everybody else, right?
The same thing.
Yeah, everybody's saying that. As we're having our Passover dinner, and now every week I'm inviting cousins to happy hour or dinner by way of Zoom, and all my family is jumping in. And so we're seeing people around the country that we're normally not seeing.
That's amazing. And I absolutely love the what you're doing and how you're making adjustments in this time. I'm so fascinated by some of the things that people are doing, the creativity that's coming out of this time with the pandemic. And I know that life is going to be different when all of this changes. But I was really inspired. As a matter of fact, I actually even bought the book when you interviewed Matt Sweezy recently.
Right. Yeah. Context marketing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent book, but it was a great interview. I learned so much about how the marketing and people's responses to marketing has changed, and how we need to just reposition ourselves. So I'm really excited. The book actually just got here 2 days ago, and I haven't started reading it yet. It's
a
really
well done book.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, that's the amazing thing is when you start to tap into some of the, using social media, using Zoom, using the platforms that are available for us to do these educational things, and just delivering great content by sharing people in our network. And that's what this video series is all about. It's just sharing people with my audience, helping people come away with maybe a nugget of something that they can then utilize and implement into their own lives to make it easier for them to connect with their audience. So I'm really excited to share you with everyone, because I think what you're doing in the arena of connecting people is just so impactful, especially in the angel venture fairs. That was my first exposure to the work that you do. But the more I learn about you and the background that you have and how you love to just encourage and connect people, it's just so amazing. Is there a specific story, about connecting with someone, or that you'd like to share with our audience, something that made a big difference in your life that may have inspired you to take a bigger step or be more bold in what you do?
Well, I don't know there's one particular story, but I can tell you this, that from my own networking, I've gotten to meet some amazing people and get some amazing clients. So I like to tell this story. One time I was on the train coming back from New York. I was visiting a client there for my consulting practice. I have a consulting practice called Kramer Communications, where I'm an outsourced chief marketing officer, but I develop business plans, sales plans, marketing plans for folks. And this woman was sitting across from me on the train. I was sitting at one of the tables in the food car part of the train. And most people just do their work and they never ask anybody around them anything. They just stick to their work. So I asked her, I'm curious, what do you do? And she told me she was the chief marketing officer of this large New York Stock Exchange company. And I asked her questions about what she does. And after, as I was going through this, she said, tell me, what do you do? And I told her what I do. And she said, we actually need someone like you to help us right now. I said, you're kidding. And she said, no, I'm going to contact you when I get home. And she lived in Wilmington, and I had gotten off the train in Philadelphia. And so she did. She contacted me that night and said, I want to set up a meeting for you to meet my boss in New York and to talk about this. And I ended up getting a $100,000 contract, which is still the largest contract I ever got at one shot. And I was blown away. And I actually had them for a couple of years in a few different projects. But if it wasn't for me, saying something, that wouldn't have happened. And I also was on a plane one time coming home from my home in Panama to the United States. And there were these three people sitting around me. And one person became a very close friend of mine, and she became the ambassador to Panama in the UN, and now is the number 3 person in the UN. Now, if I had not engaged her in conversation, we now have an 18-year relationship. And there was another guy sitting across from me on that plane, and that guy's family owned Nike, Adidas for all of Latin America. And I ended up doing consulting for that family and family business issues. So again, if you just sit there and you don't do anything and just pay attention to your book or your movie, you're missing great opportunities all the time. And you don't have to have a long conversation. You can just engage with them and ask them, so, where are you going, or what do you do? And then you're always surprised. I met a guy who sells electric bikes, and I made an introduction to my son-in-law who bought one of his electric bikes.
That's incredible. And I love that. I love, I'm one of those people that, can strike up a conversation even in the strangest of places. And I think that's something that I learned very early on by watching my dad. My dad, we used to joke, we used to refer to him as the mayor, because he just always seemed like he knew everybody. And it wasn't so much that he knew everybody, but he would just feel comfortable just walking up to someone and starting to ask them questions and having a conversation and making friends wherever he went. So,
well, I am intellectually interested in people. Mm-hmm. So I always love to hear people's stories. It could be the janitor. It doesn't make a difference who it is. I just like to hear people tell me their stories about who they are, what they've seen, what they do, about their family. So I ask a lot of questions. And I think I went to school to be a journalist. I was a broadcast journalism major. I started writing as a sports writer when I was 15, but I've always had this fascination about people. And I think that when you're networking, if you are fascinated and interested in what people do, then you're going to develop a lot of relationships and a lot of contacts. And then people are going to think of you as a go-to person for not just networking, but for a variety of other things. And the more you can help people, there's no bigger gift than maybe making introductions. I mean, even introductions outside of business. A friend of mine, one of her close friends, the son had brain cancer. And so she contacted me and I made an introduction to one of the top neurologists in the country, who happens to be at Thomas Jefferson. And he went online and talked to the doctors in another country to see what they were doing to make sure they were up to speed on the latest. And I used that same network to connect this kid with his favorite rock group. So I think, there's a great gift to be given that's cost you nothing, which is helping other people.
And that's, you're absolutely right. I think that, that coming to, and that's what I talk about, leading with your heart. It makes a big difference when you enter into a relationship with how can I give rather than what am I going to get. And I think that's such a blessing. And that's so obvious about the work that you do. And I love that you shared about being a storyteller. And understanding, loving to hear people's stories as well, and then sharing those people. I think that's where we connect on a deeper level with people in our network, is when we allow them this space to share their stories, right? And when we truly listen and acknowledge what they do, it really makes a difference.
Women are much better at it than men. It's easy to get a man to talk about himself. You go and ask him what he does, and he'll just start telling you everything. And women are, I guess, have been very good at that, and they're better listeners. But at the same time, women don't like to tell their story as much. You have to almost pull it out of them. So there's the reverse that I've seen over a period of time. But, I think as women have become more comfortable, they're more willing to share more about themselves. And of course, you're concerned about why people are interested in you, and have to filter that as well.
Yeah, great points. And, and I think that it's interesting that you see the difference in, how men network and how women network. But there's also a lot to be said for being a great connector, being a great networker, and asking really good questions. What are some of your favorite questions to ask people to get them to engage in conversation with you?
So when I see people, I'll ask them, what do they do? What college they went to? College is great because I can say, oh, I have a friend that went to that particular school. I ask them about what sports that they play, what kind of hobbies that they have. I learned one time that the CEO of a big pharmaceutical company was big into gardening. And so I sent him a book on gardening, and that turned into a good relationship where he invited me for a tour of the pharmaceutical company that he was running and asking me if there's anybody in his world I could connect him to. So I think, asking people about their kids, how many kids do you have and what do your kids do? And then during the course of the conversation, this has also often happened. People say, oh, I have 3 kids. One of them's looking for a job. Oh, really? Send me their resume. Nothing makes somebody happier than when you say, send me your kid's resume. And people are surprised that I keep everybody's resume and I make these introductions. And they're like, you actually made this introduction. Or like the other day, a woman I know contacted me and said that her daughter-in-law couldn't get into the country because they kind of froze everything. And so they've been having a hard time. So I said, well, I know somebody I think could help with this. And I wrote to them, and she said, oh my God, she's in. I'm like, 24 hours. I said, I keep wondering, did it actually happen? Or just say, lucky that it was the right place at the right time. And when she asked me this, but again, I just always think to myself, because my father was like that. My father was very helpful to people all the time, always going out of his way to help people. So I think that kind of stuck with me. And my mother's father and my father's father were both great storytellers. And I liked hearing anything that they had to tell me. And my grandfather was like a cab driver and worked at the mint and then the post office. My other grandfather had a store in our small town. And so they weren't celebrities, but they came across interesting people, and they were intellectually curious too and about people. And so they were good storytellers. My mom's a good storyteller.
So now we know where you get it from, right?
Yeah, I inherited it for sure. Absolutely.
I think the cab drivers kind of like that could definitely contribute to your curiosity.
Yeah. And he was great. I could sit and listen to him for hours tell his stories. And I almost was going to write a book based on some of the stuff that he encountered in his life that I, unfortunately, probably can't repeat on video.
Well, maybe it is time to write that book. There you go.
Yeah, it's like a Tony Soprano type of book that would end up being written for him.
That could be a movie.
Yeah. Some of the stuff he told me could definitely be a movie.
There you go. Maybe that's the next big idea for you.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about some of the projects that you're working on now. I know you mentioned the video series that you're working on with interviewing people. So share a little bit more about some of the projects that you're working on right now.
So I mentioned the bestbusinessminds.com, where I'm interviewing business book authors, which you participated in, and that's how you met the writer for context marketing. I also, and this came through this in a sense came through networking. So I'm starting a new venture. It's called fundingorganizer.com. And what Funding Organizer does is allows you, when you're applying for a commercial loan, to put all of your information in one place and share it with the banker. And so I moved to a building in Philadelphia 6 years ago, and somebody I met while walking my dog, we were talking about our background. She said, you know, the board of the condo association could really use you. Would you be interested in being on the board? And, you know, how can you say no if you think you could be helpful? So I said yes. And because I'm on that board, we ended up borrowing about $12 million. And I used my network to help raise that $12 million. And through that networking, I saw how painful the process was of getting money from a bank. Because what a bank does is they send you a PDF form, you fill it out, they ask you for 3 years of tax returns, and then if they're interested, they send you a deluge of emails every week, and it could take weeks to months to answer all their questions. So I thought, wouldn't it be better if there was one place, like a common app like kids use for college, that you filled in all the information, every conceivable question the banker would have to ask you, and within a couple hours, like using TurboTax, it would be done, and all you had to do is let the banker know. And for the banker, as opposed to dealing with 10, 20 different applicants all at different stages, emailing all of them at different times and still having to get new business, would it be better if they just sent you a link and say, just fill everything that pertains to you out and let me know when it's done? So that came through the fact that I networked, ended up on this board, had to go and raise this money, leveraged my network to go raise the money, and then found a problem that needs solving. And now I'm offering this new venture. And I also have a business called Stress-Free Family Business, where I consult with family businesses. And I ended up, I'd always worked with family businesses, but not in a formal way of having an offering. So I networked a woman from St. Joe's University, and St. Joe's hired me for 2 years to work with family businesses, which would allow me to create my own family business consulting opportunity. So again, it was all about the networking. It was all about meeting people, asking them questions, and learning more from them. And even the books I've written, I've met authors prior to my writing books and would ask them questions about it, and then they would give me good advice about writing. And so I took that. I think if you sit on your couch and you watch ESPN or binge watch shows and don't do anything else, then you're missing out on a great part of life and all the opportunities that could be offered to you from doing this networking. And so my best friends have occurred because of the networking I've done. I got to meet them, and now they've been lifelong friends.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing what networking can do for you, how it can help you grow your business. And, just the creative ideas that come out of networking and having great conversations with people and listening for what people need. So I love that you're answering the call and figuring out what to do next to serve your audience. So thank you so much for being here, for sharing your brilliance with us. I am so blessed to be able to share this time with you, Marc.
Thank you so much for having me as your guest, and hopefully we'll do it again sometime.
I would love that. I would love that. So remember to subscribe to 30 Seconds Success Connect for more videos and to share us with your friends. Thank you for being here.